Wow, Melody, you're super popular. I did a poll for who I should spotlight next, and you won.
Me? Really?
Totally. Do you mind grabbing my computer for me? I want to start on your video right away.
Yes, of course. Just give the order and I'll do anything. Or at least try. Sure hope nothing goes wrong. Right. I'll be careful not to trip and fall.
I guess we're going to have to wait a little while longer on that spotlight then, huh? That's okay, Melody. How can we be mad at you? Everyone loves the clumsy maid trope after all.
I'm so happy that I somehow managed to cheer people up. No matter how many times I mess up, I will become a real maid.
Sounds good, Melody. We believe in you. And, well, now that my computer is finally repaired, it's time for your spotlight video. So, let's get into it. As always, this video is all about one specific adventurer. This time around, Melody. And in case that skit wasn't clear enough, Melody's epithet and description summarize her well. Melody is a menace of a maid, whose details read, a devoted maid in perpetual training due to her clumsy nature. There's no way to count how many plates she's dropped or aprons she's burned. Will she ever be able to call herself a maid for true? And, well, maid or no, Melody is quite talented with a blade, as her full story goes on to explain. And from a gameplay perspective, that's her role as well. She's a 3-star support type wind element blade wielder. As a blade unit, her co-ability is to provide strength, but as a natural 3-star, sadly the percentages provided are low. 1% at base with up to 5% unlocked in her mana circle, after being promoted to a 5-star. And speaking of promotion, here are how Melody's stats progress. Ultimately, she's able to reach a max HP of 702 and a max strength of 445. Honestly though, these stats are pretty low, and the cost to get there is pretty high since Melody is a natural 3-star. Among all wind adventurers currently in the game, she ranks 5th worst in terms of strength and 3rd worst in terms of HP. Plenty of healers actually have more strength than her, and she has the lowest strength of any blade unit in the game. All the rest are attackers, while she's a support type. So if you're looking to promote Melody, it's really not about the stats, but about upgrading her skills and abilities. As a 4-star, Melody can upgrade her Force Strike, gain 50% affliction resistance, and upgrade her 2nd skill. And as a 5-star, Melody's affliction resistance bumps up to 75%, she can upgrade her 1st skill to level 3, and she can upgrade her co-ability, but at the same high Eldwater cost you see on all units, which stings a bit considering she, like all 3-stars, has inherently weaker co-abilities to begin with. For Melody, I definitely see 3-star or 5-star as the sweet spots, mainly because of that upgrade to her 1st skill. More on that in a moment. For now, here are Melody's abilities. Like all 3-stars, she has one unique ability, then 2 ability slots dedicated to affliction resistance. In Melody's case, her unique ability is full HP equals critical rate up to 8%. And this is a very demanding ability to use on a close-range fighter like her, so much so that it's almost easier to pretend it's not there and treat it like a bonus when it actually is active. 8% critical rate is a lot, especially when stacked with the Dagger teammate or Wormprint like Levin's champion. It's just very tough to maintain full HP for more than a few seconds per map with Melody, even when packing a healer. For affliction resistance, Melody fares a bit better. Freeze res is fairly uncommon, and it's rather helpful on Water Imperial Onslaught. As a 4-star, Melody can upgrade her initial freeze res ability to 50%, and as a 5-star, she unlocks a 2nd freeze res ability, bringing up her total to 75% once maxed out. It's unfortunate that this doesn't reach up to 100% naturally, but that's an issue with all 3-stars, not one unique to Melody. So Melody's stats and abilities are, frankly, a bit subpar. But here's the big redeeming factor for Melody, her 1st skill, Maid for Mayhem. This is the main reason you'd want to use Melody in my view, besides loving her character, since it's something truly special she can bring to your win teams. Maid for Mayhem grants a strength buff to your entire team for 15 seconds, up to 15% if Melody is a 5-star. Being Melody's 1st skill, This charges very quickly. It takes around 2 basic attack combos using her blade, and the skill cast duration is snappy too, taking around 1.4 seconds. While not as large a buff as, say, Xainfried's second skill, which grants 20% strength to your team, the big advantage to Melody is how frequently you can activate Maid for Mayhem with its quick charging. In my experience, you can feasibly keep this skill up and buff your team around 50% of the time in a match. Since Melody's own strength is low, of course, the power of this skill scales greatly depending on your teammates. Still, it's quite a sizable buff, unique within the win pool, and it gives Melody a niche. As for Melody's second skill, well, there's less to discuss here. Gyro's Tire is a simple attacking skill with a quick iframe window, less than a second, which takes around 3 basic combos to fully charge, depending on how you execute the final moves of the blade attack sequence. There's a very tiny hop back in this skill, but seemingly not large or long enough to use to dodge, say, a purple enemy attack. You can pretty much use this skill as soon as it's charged, perhaps timing it to utilize the iframe as well. Now when it comes to building Melody, the main thing I'd say is that Melody is rather squishy. If you want her in the fray to charge her first skill, she's going to eat some hits, and that can make her die quickly if you aren't careful. The other consideration is that Melody doesn't have 2 innate attacking skills, so a skill damage Wormprint isn't quite as good on her, making builds a bit more complicated. My first build idea focuses on survival, so Melody can cast her buff skill as much as possible during a match. Tempest Blade allows Melody to buff her own defense, which then triggers the healing double buff on a wish upon the Yule Tree. Garuda also provides a source of healing via her dragon skill, while boosting Melody's HP to increase her bulk. Together, this healing helps keep Melody above 70% HP, allowing her to utilize the extra defense provided by a wish upon the Yule Tree as well. With these multiple ways to heal, and possibly by running a healer too, Melody will also get to utilize her full HP equals critical rate ability at least a small percentage of the time. But if you're quite skilled at dodging with Melody and are less worried about survival, my second build is more aggressive. Night Stalker can bring Melody up to 100% freeze res while enhancing her Force Strike damage. Not too bad considering how useful the Blade Force Strike is for mobility, and that it can be woven into the basic Blade attack sequence pretty easily. Besides that, Crimson Shade, which can eventually be enhanced into the 5-star Wind Elemental Blade, provides Melody another attacking skill. Zephyr, meanwhile, is there to boost Melody's strength as much as possible. The higher her base strength, the more she'll benefit from her own Maid for Mayhem buff. These are, of course, just a few examples of what you can do with Melody. Ultimately, it comes down to what you have access to. In my case, when recording gameplay, I only had base Midgard Stormer and Sylvia, and that's perfectly fine. Even high Midgard Stormer would work well on Melody if you have him. I only suggest leaning away from skill damage and remembering that Melody is a pretty frail character. As for how Melody relates to other units, she honestly doesn't combo with anyone specific. She just needs strong bodies on the field to receive her strength buff. From an affliction perspective, I do like Hawk and Nicholas since they are attackers with freeze res, plus they both inflict stun, which sets up the perfect opportunity for Melody to buff and let your team go to town. The only issue is that Hawk depends on Force Strikes, meaning you'll need to control him at least part of the match to fully utilize those. Generally speaking though, any teammates can work well for Melody. For competition, there's only one other Wind Blade, Musashi, and he is really good. Musashi has more HP and more strength than Melody, plus he's a more self-reliant character with his kit. Having said that, however, Musashi does have Bog Res instead of Freeze Res, which, along with Melody's buff, helps differentiate her. The same thing about Bog Res is true of Maribel, who's truly just as good a teammate for Melody as a competitor. The reason I list her here is that she's functionally similar to Melody in one regard, just a little bit better. Maribel's first skill charges quickly and debuffs enemy defense half the time, making it not unlike the strength buff granted by Melody. The thing that makes Maribel so much stronger though is that her skill actually deals damage, and a lot of it, in a wide area, besides just providing a debuff. In tandem with Melody, this could really tip the scales in favor of your team. But Maribel is strong enough on her own that you may not need Melody if you have her. Now let's take a look at some gameplay. I'm going to solo Water Imperial Onslaught on Master with Melody in the lead. This was recorded before a lot of my recent summoning, so my team, and Melody herself, are geared out on a budget. Melody is rocking a level 50 Sylvia and the Glorious Tempest Wormprint, simply because that provided her the most additional HP among my options. We're going to see if I can survive the onslaught and just how many times I can utilize Melody's first skill. Now my play is far from perfect. I don't know the optimal sequence for blades, and I get hit a number of times, but that's pretty hard to avoid on a crowded map like this. Right away, Melody loses access to her first ability, making it pretty much a non-factor, but her skill, on the other hand, I'm able to activate quickly, and Melody's 4 strikes also help her move around the map rapidly. Sometimes I would stand still. In these cases, I was trying to use the 4 strike, but my input failed. Most of the time though, I was able to get where I needed with it and avoid being frozen. For teammates, poor Louise was the only one without any sort of freeze res, but I brought her along because she was one of the stronger attackers I had. My Sophie was there to help me survive, but she herself got frozen quite often with her minimal freeze res too. For my helper, I used Maribel, and transforming into her really helped me through some crowded AoE attacks in the middle of the map, where it looked like Melody was in rough shape. Finally, Eileen rounded out the team nicely thanks to her 100% freeze res, and her defense buff helped keep Melody alive for much of the match. A few mistimed skills here and there, but all in all, this was an exciting match. I recorded this when I was barely starting to be able to solo the Master Imperial Onslaughts, especially Water, so it was a thrill to get the victory, even if I lost Melody on the final blow. I refused to switch characters to free her from a freeze, since this is her spotlight video after all. Still, a pretty epic way to end off that fight. Her selflessness and recklessness really know no bounds. And for those of you counting, I was able to use Melody's skill a total of 7 times, for 105 seconds. If Melody hadn't been frozen and the match had gone longer, I think I could have eked out an 8th use, putting us at 120 seconds or 2 minutes, exactly half the time limit for the map. Either way, that's a pretty large uptime for a 10% strength buff to the entire team. I can only imagine if my Melody was a 5-star and providing 15% strength instead. I'd guess it's a fearsome sight to behold. Now to wrap things up, I'm going to play the first chapter of Melody's character story. You probably know where this is going. Clumsy maid, etc, etc. But honestly, there was a satisfying turn in Melody's story for me, and one which explains her use of the blade. So in the end, I was pretty happy with her character. It's just hard not to like her. And I do think she's unique among the roster, both in terms of personality and gameplay. For my final verdict on Melody, I'll just add this. Melody has a niche, being one of very few units, and the only unit in the Wind Pool to buff team strength. She's a good choice for content like Water Imperial Onslaught, but the Wind Pool has many powerful units who also excel at that map. Think of Maribel, Eileen, and the many wind archers, so whether you invest in her should really come down to how much you like her character. I don't see her being especially good at 4-star, since her Maid for Mayhem skill doesn't upgrade at that stage, so I do suggest either leaving her at 3-star or going up to 5. For higher level endgame content, Melody is more questionable. For now, it would seem the trend with high dragons is that they inflict the same affliction as their normal counterpart. If that holds up and High Mercury inflicts Bog, and especially if High Mercury hits even harder than High Brunhilde and Midgard Stormer being released later, it's very possible that Melody will be completely unviable for it. So for the small percentage of the player base attempting those trials or gearing up for them eventually, I will say your precious Eltwater might be better spent elsewhere. That's all just speculation, of course. In any case, your 3-star Melody should be able to do just fine for Water IO in the meantime. She's great to round out a team too, since the AI can utilize both of her skills effectively. Alright, and as her first encounter story comes to a close, that concludes my analysis of Melody. Thank you so much for watching and patiently waiting as I worked on the spotlight. Definitely let me know if you like this format, since I made some adjustments this time, The video is now vertical on mobile, hopefully giving you a better picture of the gameplay, so I hope you enjoyed it. Otherwise, we have one more 3-star spotlight to go before I start tipping into 4 stars. And next time, a water adventure will be featured. Let me know in the comments who you want to see, and of course, what you think of Melody. I'd love to hear what you have to say. With that, take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.
My special power is breaking stuff. Wait, that's not a power.